Imagine discovering that the most artificial substance humans ever created has quietly become part of your biology, circulating in your blood, resting in your tissues, and interacting with your cells, yet your body, remarkably, still knows how to defend itself if you give it the chance. There is something deeply unsettling, yet intellectually fascinating, about realizing that microplastics are no longer just an environmental issue, but a biological one. These particles do not announce themselves with pain or immediate illness. They enter quietly, through the water we drink, the food we eat, and the air we breathe, slipping past our senses because of their microscopic size. Science now confirms their presence in blood, lungs, and even tissues once believed to be well protected. And this knowledge forces us to reconsider how intimately connected the human body is with its surroundings. The body has never been a sealed system. It is a living interface between the external world and our internal physiology, constantly negotiating what is allowed in and what must be removed. Microplastics are simply the latest test of this negotiation. What is remarkable is not just that these particles can enter the body, but that the body does not immediately surrender control. From a scientific standpoint, exposure does not equal accumulation by default. Some microplastics pass through without consequence, others interact with immune cells, and some may trigger low-grade inflammation depending on size, shape, and chemical composition. This variability reveals something important. The outcome is influenced as much by the condition of the host as by the presence of the particle. A resilient biological system responds differently than a stressed one. This shifts the conversation away from helplessness and toward understanding how internal health shapes external impact. Fear often arises when people imagine toxins building up endlessly inside them, but biology is more nuanced. The body evolved in a world full of dust, smoke, pollen, and foreign particles, and it developed sophisticated strategies to manage intrusion. Mucosal barriers, immune surveillance, and cellular cleanup mechanisms work continuously, even when we are not aware of them. Microplastics challenge these systems not because they are invincible, but because modern lifestyles often weaken the very defenses designed to handle such exposures. Poor nutrition, chronic inflammation, dehydration, and inactivity change how the body processes what it encounters. Recognizing microplastics as a presence rather than a sentence alters our perspective. It invites responsibility instead of panic. When we understand that exposure is widespread but response is personal, we begin to see health as a dynamic process rather than a fixed outcome. The body is not passively contaminated. It is actively responding, adapting, and attempting to maintain balance in an altered environment. This understanding opens the door to a quieter form of empowerment, one rooted in biology rather than fear, and grounded in the idea that even in a synthetic world, the human organism retains an ancient capacity to adapt, filter, and decide what becomes part of us and what is guided gently back out into the world. Detoxification is often imagined as a dramatic intervention, something that must be forced or accelerated, but science tells a far more refined story. Inside the human body, detoxification is not an event, but a continuous process, unfolding quietly through the coordinated work of the liver, kidneys, gut, lungs, and immune system. These organs do not wait for permission or trends. They operate moment by moment, filtering blood, modifying chemicals, escorting waste into bile, urine, breath, and stool. When microplastics enter the body, they do not encounter a passive space, but an active landscape of surveillance and regulation. Understanding this reframes detoxification from an external fix into an internal relationship. The liver sits at the center of this process, not as a storage site for toxins, but as a biochemical translator. It transforms substances into forms the body can move and release, often binding them to bile so they can exit through digestion. The kidneys complement this work by filtering the blood's water-soluble components, constantly adjusting what is retained and what is excreted. Meanwhile, the gut serves as both a gatekeeper and an exit route, determining whether foreign material is escorted out efficiently or allowed to linger. None of this requires extreme measures. It requires functional capacity. What weakens detoxification is rarely a lack of cleanses, but a lack of support. Chronic dehydration slows filtration. Nutrient-poor diets deprive enzymes of the building blocks they need. Inflammation disrupts signaling between organs, turning a coordinated system into a fragmented one. When the body is under constant stress, its priority shifts toward survival rather than optimization, and detoxification becomes less efficient not because it fails, but because it adapts to perceived threat. Microplastics, in this context, become more noticeable not because they are suddenly more toxic, but because the system handling them is compromised. Supporting detoxification, then, is an act of cooperation rather than control. Adequate hydration restores flow. Whole foods provide the minerals and phytochemicals that enzyme systems depend on. Regular bowel movement ensures that what the liver sends to the gut actually leaves the body. Gentle physical activity stimulates circulation and lymphatic movement, preventing stagnation. These actions appear simple because they are fundamental, aligning with how the body was designed to function long before modern pollutants existed. There is also a philosophical shift embedded in this science. Detoxification is not about purging impurity. It is about maintaining conversation. The body is constantly asking what belongs and what does not, adjusting its responses based on internal resources and external load. When we strengthen the systems that ask and answer those questions, we reduce the need for extremes. In doing so, detoxification becomes less about fear of contamination and more about trust in biological intelligence. A reminder that even in a complex, synthetic environment, the human body still responds best to steady support, patience, and respect for its natural rhythms. The gut is often described as a digestive organ, but this description barely captures its deeper role in determining what becomes part of us and what does not. It is a vast, intelligent interface where food, microbes, immune cells, and foreign particles all meet, negotiate, and influence outcomes that reach far beyond digestion itself. When microplastics enter the body through food and water, the gut is the first major decision point. Here, the strength of the gut barrier, the diversity of the microbiome, and the efficiency of movement through the intestines quietly shape whether these particles pass through as temporary visitors or linger long enough to cause irritation and immune activation. From a biological perspective, the lining of the gut is not meant to be porous. Its cells are held together by tight junctions that function like selective gates, allowing nutrients to pass while keeping unwanted material out. Diet has a direct influence on how well these gates function. Fiber-rich plant foods feed beneficial bacteria, which in turn produce compounds that nourish gut cells and reinforce barrier integrity. When this system is supported, the gut becomes less permissive to foreign particles, including microplastics, reducing the likelihood that they cross into circulation or provoke chronic inflammation. Hydration adds another layer of quiet efficiency. Water is not merely a vehicle for digestion. It determines the speed and consistency of intestinal movement. When the gut is well hydrated, waste is moved along smoothly, minimizing contact time between microplastics and the intestinal lining. This reduced exposure matters. The longer foreign particles remain in contact with tissue, the greater the opportunity for irritation or absorption. Regular elimination is not a trivial detail. It is one of the most practical expressions of detoxification the body performs each day. Antioxidants further shape this internal environment, not by attacking microplastics directly, but by calming the inflammatory responses they may trigger. Fruits, vegetables, herbs, and naturally pigmented foods provide compounds that reduce oxidative stress within gut tissue. This matters because inflammation weakens barriers. A calm gut is a strong gut, and a strong gut is better equipped to escort foreign material outward rather than reacting defensively and creating further imbalance. What emerges from this understanding is a shift away from forceful detox narratives and toward biological stewardship. The gut does not need to be scrubbed or shocked into health. It needs consistency, nourishment, and respect for its rhythms. When fiber, water, and antioxidants are present, the gut performs a form of daily housekeeping that is both simple and profound. Microplastics, in this context, are not battled. They are managed. They are bound, moved, and released through processes that feel almost meditative in their regularity, reminding us that the most effective detoxification strategies are often the least dramatic, rooted in supporting the systems that quietly decide, every day, what stays and what is gently guided out of the body. The body has pathways of detoxification that are rarely discussed because they do not fit the dramatic image of cleansing, yet they operate constantly and with remarkable efficiency. Breathing and movement belong to this overlooked category. Every breath we take is not only an exchange of oxygen and carbon dioxide, but a mechanical and biological process that helps clear inhaled particles from the respiratory system. Microplastics suspended in air can enter through the lungs, but the lungs are not passive entry points. They are lined with protective cells and microscopic movements that guide foreign material upward and outward. When breathing is shallow and rushed, this clearance becomes less efficient. When breathing is slow and deep, airflow reaches deeper regions and supports the natural sweeping mechanisms that help move unwanted particles toward exit. Movement extends this process beyond the lungs into the entire internal transport system. The lymphatic system, which is responsible for moving waste, immune cells, and excess fluid, does not have a pump like the heart. It relies on muscle contraction, posture, and motion to circulate its contents. When the body is sedentary, lymphatic flow slows, and waste clearance becomes less efficient. Gentle, regular movement stimulates this system, creating a steady current that helps escort inflammatory byproducts and foreign particles away from tissues. This does not require intensity or strain. Walking, stretching, and rhythmic motion are enough to awaken a system designed for continuity rather than extremes. Sweat, often dismissed as a mere sign of exertion, represents another subtle exit route. While sweat is not a primary detox pathway like the liver or kidneys, it reflects increased circulation and metabolic activity. When blood flow improves and skin temperature rises, the body creates additional opportunities for waste exchange. The value of sweating lies less in what leaves through the skin and more in what movement and heat do to support the systems responsible for elimination. In this way, sweating becomes a marker of engagement rather than a standalone solution. There is also a neurological dimension to breathing and movement that quietly influences detoxification. Slow breathing activates the parasympathetic nervous system, shifting the body out of a stress-dominated state. Under chronic stress, detoxification is deprioritized as the body focuses on immediate survival. When calm breathing signals safety, resources are redirected toward maintenance and repair. This internal permission allows organs involved in detoxification to work more effectively, including those managing microplastic exposure. What makes these practices surprisingly powerful is their simplicity. They do not demand special equipment, strict rules, or extreme discipline. They ask only for presence and consistency. The body responds not to intensity, but to rhythm. Breath by breath, step by step, circulation improves, waste moves, and foreign particles are guided toward exit rather than accumulation. In this light, breathing and movement are not just health habits. They are expressions of alignment with how the body was built to function. Through them, detoxification becomes less about removing something specific and more about restoring flow. A reminder that when the body moves and breathes well, it naturally creates the conditions needed to release what does not belong and preserve what sustains life. There is a quiet form of detoxification that begins long before any biological process takes over, and it exists at the level of daily choice and awareness. Microplastics enter the body not because of a single failure, but because modern life is saturated with synthetic materials designed for convenience rather than compatibility with human biology. Food packaging, water bottles, household items, and even clothing shed particles that become part of our environment. Reducing exposure is not about eliminating plastic entirely, which is neither realistic nor necessary, but about lowering the overall burden so the body is not constantly asked to manage more than it was designed to handle from a scientific standpoint. Detoxification capacity is finite at any given moment. When exposure exceeds that capacity, accumulation becomes more likely. Simple shifts, such as choosing glass or stainless steel for food and water storage, avoiding heating food in plastic, and favoring whole foods over heavily packaged options, reduce the number of particles entering the body each day. These choices do not work by detoxifying microplastics already present, but by creating breathing room for the body's natural elimination systems to function without constant overload. There is also a psychological dimension to this process that often goes unrecognized. When people approach detoxification with perfectionism or fear, stress hormones rise, inflammation increases, and the body's ability to eliminate waste is subtly impaired. In contrast, mindful reduction fosters a sense of agency without anxiety. The nervous system responds to this calm with improved digestion, better sleep, and more efficient metabolic regulation, all of which indirectly support detoxification. In this way, conscious choice becomes a biological signal, not just a lifestyle preference. Environmental awareness extends beyond objects to habits. Filtering drinking water, ventilating living spaces, and being attentive to indoor air quality reduce inhaled and ingested particles. These are not dramatic interventions. They are quiet adjustments that accumulate impact over time. Each small reduction matters because detoxification is cumulative. The body responds not to isolated actions, but to patterns repeated day after day. What emerges from this perspective is a reframing of responsibility. Detoxification is not a battle against the environment, but a negotiation with it. The goal is not purity, but balance. When exposure is reduced even modestly, the body regains a sense of proportion, allowing its systems to operate within their natural range rather than at the edge of capacity. This approach honors the reality of modern life while respecting the limits of human biology. Ultimately, reducing plastic contact is an act of compassion toward the body. It acknowledges that while the body is resilient, it is not indifferent. By choosing materials and habits that align more closely with biological needs, we allow detoxification to become less of a struggle and more of a steady background process. In this space, health is not achieved through control or avoidance, but through thoughtful engagement with the world we live in, trusting that when the incoming load is lighter, the body's ancient intelligence can once again do what it has always done best: maintain balance, adapt with grace, and quietly let go of what no longer serves it.